Most people think confidence is something you either have or you don't. But that's not true. Confidence actually has levels, and depending on which level you're operating from, you might be constantly seeking approval, doubting your potential, or losing confidence the moment things get uncomfortable. There are 5 levels of confidence, and most people get stuck at level 1 or 2 without even realizing it. So as we go through them, see if you can identify exactly where you are. Because by the end of this video, you'll know what's holding your confidence back and what it takes to reach the highest level. Welcome to Neo-Neuron, where hidden psychology becomes visible. Level 1. Approval-seeking confidence. The lowest level of confidence isn't having no confidence at all. It's letting other people decide how confident you feel. At this level, your confidence rises and falls based on other people's reactions. You feel good when someone praises you, when your post gets likes, when your teacher, boss, friends, or family approve of what you're doing. But the moment that approval disappears, so does your confidence. You want to answer a question in class but stay silent because you're afraid of sounding stupid. You want to apply for a better job but think, what if they reject me? You spend half an hour writing a message, then delete it because you're worried about how the other person will react. Deep down, you're constantly asking, do people think I'm good enough? And because your confidence depends on that answer, criticism feels devastating. A bad comment ruins your day. A small mistake makes you question yourself. A rejection doesn't feel like feedback. It feels like proof that you're not capable. The problem isn't that other people's opinions affect you. The problem is that they control you. You avoid speaking up. You avoid taking risks. You avoid opportunities that could expose you to failure, not because you lack potential, but because every judgment feels like a verdict on your worth. Over time, you stop doing what you want to do and start doing what feels safest. Why does this happen? Because your brain learned early that approval equals safety. Good grades got praise. Following rules got acceptance. Fitting in helped you avoid rejection. So, over time, your brain started connecting self-worth with other people's reactions. That's why criticism feels so painful. Your brain isn't treating it as information, it's treating it as a threat. A threat to your belonging, a threat to your identity. But what happens when you stop letting other people define your worth? What happens when your confidence starts coming from your own beliefs instead of their approval? That's where level 2 begins. Level 2. Limited confidence. The most dangerous confidence problem isn't believing you're incapable, it's believing you've already discovered your limits. At this level, you don't think you're bad at everything. You just think you know what you're capable of. Maybe you've thought about starting a YouTube channel, applying for a better job, learning a new skill, or pursuing a bigger goal. But before you even begin, a familiar voice shows up. Maybe this just isn't my thing. Some people are naturally good at that. I've probably reached my limit. You look at successful people and see something different about them. More talent, more intelligence, more confidence, more luck. And slowly, without realizing it, you start treating your current abilities as your permanent identity. These beliefs don't just make you feel bad. They stop you from growing. You don't apply for the opportunity. You don't start the project. You don't practice long enough to improve. You don't discover what you're actually capable of, not because you failed, but because you've already decided what the result will be. Your limits begin to feel real, not because you've reached them, but because you've stopped testing them. Why does this happen? For many people, this belief develops over years. Maybe you were constantly compared to someone who seemed smarter, more talented, or more successful. Maybe you tried something, failed, and quietly turned that failure into an identity. Or maybe after years of seeing other people's highlights, it became easier to believe they had something you didn't. Over time, your brain starts treating ability like a fixed trait instead of something that can grow. You stop asking, what could I become? And start asking, what am I naturally good at? But every skill you've ever learned proves the opposite. Nobody starts out capable. Capability is built. The people you admire weren't born at the finish line. They simply stayed in the game long enough to improve. So the real question isn't whether you're capable. The real question is, have you mistaken your current level for your potential? Because the biggest mistake at level 2 isn't believing you're average. It's believing you'll always be average. But what happens when you finally start believing you can grow, yet still lose confidence the moment you're outside your comfort zone? That's where level 3 begins. Situational confidence. You don't lack confidence, you just keep losing it. It feels strangely inconsistent. Some days you feel capable, intelligent, and completely in control. Other days you feel like you've forgotten how to be yourself. You can joke comfortably with close friends, but become awkward around people you don't know. You can perform well at your current job, but hesitate to apply for a better one. You can share your ideas with people who support you, but stay silent when you're surrounded by people you want to impress. It's not that you're incapable. It's that your confidence seems to depend on where you are and who you're with. When you're in familiar territory, you think, I've got this. But the moment you're in a new environment, The thoughts change. What if I mess this up? What if they realize I'm not as capable as they think? What if I'm not ready yet? So you retreat to what's comfortable, not because it's what you want, but because it's where your confidence feels safe. The problem is that growth rarely happens inside familiar territory. Every opportunity worth having comes with some uncertainty. A new job, a new relationship, a new skill, a new challenge. And if your confidence only exists in situations you've already mastered, your world slowly stops expanding. You stay where you're comfortable, not where you're capable of going. The result is frustrating. You know you're capable of more, but somehow your confidence disappears exactly when you need it most. At this level, your confidence is attached to familiarity. Your brain has gathered evidence that you can succeed in certain situations. So it feels safe there, but unfamiliar situations don't come with that evidence. They come with uncertainty, and your brain interprets uncertainty as risk. That's why you can feel confident in one room and insecure in the next. The confidence isn't gone, it just hasn't learned how to survive outside familiar environments. But what happens when confidence stops depending on the situation? What happens when you've faced enough challenges that you no longer need a familiar environment to believe in yourself? That's where level 4 begins. Level 4, self-trust confidence. At this level, confidence stops being about knowing you'll succeed. It's about knowing you'll be okay even if you don't. You still feel nervous before important moments. You still face uncertainty. But uncertainty no longer stops you. You apply for the job even though you might get rejected. You share your work even though some people might not like it. You start the project before knowing exactly how it will turn out. You don't wait until you're completely ready. You trust yourself to handle whatever happens next. When challenges appear, your inner dialogue sounds different. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you start asking, "What can I learn?" Instead of thinking, "What if this doesn't work out?" you think, "I'll figure it out." You no longer see mistakes as evidence that you're incapable. You see them as part of the process. But getting to this level requires letting go of something most people desperately want: certainty. You have to accept that some risks won't pay off. Some people will reject you. Some plans will fail. Some opportunities won't work out. And that's uncomfortable because there's no guarantee of success, only the confidence that you'll be able to handle whatever happens. At this level, your confidence is no longer built on outcomes. It's built on experience. You've survived embarrassment, mistakes, rejections, and failures. And each time, your brain collected evidence that you were stronger than you thought. Eventually, you stop trusting the outcome and start trusting yourself. That's the difference. You realize that failure can hurt without defining you. Mistakes can happen without diminishing you. And uncertainty can exist without controlling you. But what happens when even success and failure stop affecting your sense of worth? What happens when your confidence no longer depends on outcomes at all? That's where level 5 begins. Level 5, Unshakable Confidence. Most people think confidence means believing you'll succeed, but the highest level of confidence has nothing to do with success. It's knowing your worth doesn't change whether you succeed or fail. At this level, you still care about results, you still work hard, you still have goals, but your self-worth is no longer attached to them. You share your ideas even when people disagree. You pursue what matters to you even when others don't understand it. You can fail at something important and still respect yourself afterward. You don't need everyone to approve. You don't need every plan to work out. Your inner dialogue changes completely. Instead of asking, "What will people think?" you ask, "What do I think?" Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you ask, "Is this worth doing?" And once the answer is yes, you move forward, not because you're certain, because your values matter more than your fears. Ironically, reaching this level means giving up something many people spend their entire lives chasing: the need to be universally liked. You accept that some people will misunderstand you. Some people won't approve of your choices. Some people may even criticize you. But you no longer see disagreement as evidence that you're wrong. You understand that being authentic sometimes comes with friction, and you're willing to pay that price. At this level, you've learned a simple truth: your value isn't something you earn, it's something you already have. For years, confidence was tied to approval, then achievement, then competence. But eventually you realize that none of those things can determine your worth, because they can all disappear. Success can disappear. Status can disappear. Other people's opinions can change overnight. But your value remains. And once you truly understand that, confidence stops feeling like something you have to maintain. It becomes part of who you are. If your worth doesn't depend on success, if it doesn't depend on failure, and it doesn't depend on what anyone else thinks, then what exactly is left to be afraid of? This is unshakable confidence. The point where confidence is no longer something you perform. It's simply who you are. Which raises an interesting question. What happens at level 6? Now, some of you are probably wondering, what's level 6? Unlimited confidence? You never feel nervous. You never feel embarrassed. You never question yourself. You never overthink. You never make mistakes. Basically, you're a perfect human being. Which is exactly why level 6 doesn't exist. I'm serious. Even the most confident people on Earth still get nervous. Actors get stage fright. Athletes feel pressure. CEOs second-guess decisions. Even Superman gets a little uncomfortable around kryptonite. Even Thanos spent half his screen time sitting on a rock questioning his life choices. The goal of confidence was never to become fearless, never to stop caring, never to reach some magical state where nothing affects you anymore. That's not confidence. That's either a robot or someone who hasn't checked their exam results yet. Real confidence is being nervous and doing it anyway, being rejected and trying again, being criticized and staying true to yourself. If you've reached level 5, congratulations. You've basically beaten the confidence game. As for level 6, if you ever meet someone who claims they're there, they're probably back at level 1 and just really confident about it. Subscribe for more content like this.